everybody. Thanks so much for joining us today. I'm Shauna Griffiths, host of Real Talk, powered by CMD. And today I have my very good friend, Adrienne Ankola-Rochetti, with me. Thank you so much for joining today, Adrienne.
Thank you for having me. I'm so pumped for this conversation.
So, Adrienne, you are currently the Vice President of Social Impact for CSM, but you also have some serious chops in brand partnerships. And so, folks, Adrienne and I were able to work together for a few years, and her wife worked at the same place. And it was so great to see Adrienne and Anuja as their relationship developed. And, Adrienne, you became one of my best friends. And, I'm just, again, so grateful to have you here today. When I was thinking about this today, and, it's like, if I'm picking a team, I want you as my point guard, my floor general, and my captain. So, I think your journey is so awesome. Like I use the basketball reference because you obviously were point guard at NYU in college. So you went from basketball to the boardroom, then had a stint in entrepreneurialism, and then back to the boardroom. So it's quite a journey and an evolution. I'd love you to share that with us.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I still to this day, like Shauna-isms pop in my head all of the time. And so, I know we're going to have different parts of this discussion, but I think like part of me finding my footing and my voice was like working for someone like you who kind of recognized that power and the translatability of diverse backgrounds and experiences, as well as the parts of being an athlete that do really translate to your everyday job. And I think my journey, I mentioned that because I think my journey, and I'm still on that journey, has been translating my entire life up to this point, especially the big part of it that was being an athlete, into finding my path, professionally. I know a lot of people, share in that, but yeah, so basketball has been ball is life. Basketball was always really my whole life. So when I was thinking about where I was going to start my career, I couldn't really picture not having that still be a part of my life. And I was fortunate enough to really start out at the Wnba right out of school, and I got to work on the corporate partnerships team there. And I always say it was like the most interesting time to be doing that, because interesting and challenging in that that was around 2008, an economic crisis and a really tough time to be selling sponsorship and doing many facets of business. But it ended up being a blessing in disguise, in that one of the ways that we pivoted was really helping brands rally around the incredible work that the NBA and WNBA was doing at the time in global social responsibility. And that's really what kind of piqued an interest for me in social impact, and kind of helped me translate my experiences in life and as an athlete and as a queer person into this unique point of view and this interest in social change. And my boss at the time, Rachel Jacobson, who's actually now leads up the DRL, she said to me, I remember she said to me one day, I feel like all you really want to work on, and I mean this in a positive way, is all the NBA cares and WNBA care stuff. And I kind of had that aha moment of like, you're actually 100% correct. So hopefully I can still keep my job. But yes, I do really want to work on that. And that really led me down a path of going kind of full. I went back to school at night to study nonprofit management. I started working full time for a nonprofit organization, and ultimately ended up, leaving the NBA. And my career at that point kind of stayed in the social change realm. I worked for a nonprofit. I started with the founder of the nonprofit, started a diversity hiring software and social venture startup. I went into consulting at a group called Purpose, who was really dealing with movement building and people-powered social change. And serendipitously found my way back to Lead Dog at the time to work for you. I remember meeting you that day that I was at the office, and never really saw myself kind of going back into partnerships or kind of touching the sports world again. But the dots were so connected when we met, and you talked about what you were doing, and I saw how you operated as an athlete and as a leader. And I was just so inspired, and to kind of take that journey I had been on and go combine it and kind of go back to that world of sports and partnerships. And I think for you as a leader in talking to me, I was intimidated at first because I felt like I'm a little bit of a fish out of the water here. I'm like, well, I'm now like I'm the nonprofit person now, or I'm the social impact person now, and you were kind of describing the work that your group did, and I couldn't at first see myself in it,
Oh,
but then
okay.
as I described sort of what I did, you kind of helped me discover that, oh, actually that's really relevant to what you're doing, and that can kind of give me a unique foothold within the team. So you kind of
Yeah.
welcomed that background versus saying, oh
Wow.
no, if you didn't do this and this, sorry, this isn't the kind of the role for you,
Oh,
which I
wow.
feel like oftentimes people do
Yeah.
encounter that, in the
Uh-huh.
hiring process. So I'll pause there because I know that was a long description of the journey, but yeah, wanted to touch
No,
on.
that's awesome. No, and I appreciate that. You don't, I didn't realize that at the time. And I just remember, and it's so great to hear like your story of evolution. And it's also how, sounds like it was very much like one thing and then led you to the next. And it's almost this incredible intertwining of those things that you're, working on, we worked on together, and then you're, continuing to kind of carry that torch. So that truly is the evolution. So
Yeah.
that's awesome. And you mentioned the first time we met, and I remember it pretty vividly too. We were sitting across from each other, and I was so taken with your level of realness and presence, and confidence and comfort in your own skin. And it was definitely something that I was like, I want that, and it was like the qualities combined with your experience. And it's interesting because you've navigated a pretty male dominated, traditionally, traditionally male dominated, traditionally straight, in landscape in corporate America. And yet in the midst of that, again, your realness and your sense of self really stood out to me. So I'm curious, like, as you came up, was your identity something that you thought about, that it could perhaps impact your journey? Was it something that you, like, did you always feel this comfortable, or did you have to work on it? I just would love your thoughts on that part of your journey.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think, there's different parts of my identity too that um I wouldn't say wrestled with, but I that were kind of maybe pain points for me or struggle points that then turned into something that fueled my confidence and fueled my point of view. And I think the first point that I want to bring up is the point of being an athlete. And I think
Yeah,
I really, really leaned into that identity. I loved,
absolutely.
there are people that played college athletics and it was a part of their life, but it wasn't everything. And for
Yeah,
me, I loved being a basketball player and I loved the game and I
yeah.
loved everything about being a small underdog, undersized basketball player. So that part of, I had so much confidence in that role.
Yeah.
The immediate transition into like working a full-time job in sponsorship, it did not translate for me. And I'm very much like a person that, I'm an introvert. I defer to other people. I'm not going to be the first voice in the room or the loudest voice in the room. And I think I perceived that as a weakness. And I was not confident in my
Uh,
first job. I was really struggling to find my voice and to think of myself as a professional or as a professional in the sports industry. I was still
yeah,
like, I'm a basketball player, but that was separate. And now I don't know how to do this. And so that really took a while for me to get my footing and to understand how actually that's a point of power, being an
yeah,
introvert, being someone who is observes and then has your voice and uses it in strategic ways. And oh, actually being a basketball player and having leaned into that and working at the Wnba, and even if I had worked at a different sport, like that is actually a unique story and a unique part of your identity. And there are
yeah,
qualities from that do position you to be a leader in this new space. But I couldn't
absolutely.
really connect the dots and see the how of that. It took me like quite a bit of time. And then I didn't really, the other part of my identity as being a gay woman, um, took me a lot of time to get really comfortable with that, to come out to myself, to come out to those around me. And I really struggled. I struggled with my family and coming out. And I think I associated that a lot of folks would have a similar reaction. So I
Mm,
was not out at work when I was a young professional. And so showing up every day, and as people say, not bringing your full
full
self to
self,
work,
yeah.
like you hear a lot about that. And I lived that. And it
Mm,
totally, totally impacted me when people are
yeah.
talking about a lot of ways that people show their personality and develop relationships at work is like sharing their life outside of the office that are sometimes that is the most interesting part of your life. And to kind of dance around that and not really share that, it makes it really hard for people to get to know you and to kind of develop
Yeah.
those relationships. And furthermore, if you're carrying around a secret or
Mm.
shame over who you are, how are you going to rise to the occasion and succeed when
Yeah.
you're a young person in a new job, or any person in a job? So it took me a long time on both of those journeys of like the athlete to the professional, and then just as a person who could be comfortable in their own skin and being who
Yeah.
they are, unapologetically who they are, and not
Right.
worrying if other people are going to judge me or think differently about me. And actually, they might appreciate that
Yeah.
part of me and celebrate that part of me. It transformed how I was able to be successful, or be a leader in my roles, the various roles I played, for sure.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I'm glad you mentioned that, bringing your whole self forward, because it is something that, as I mentioned earlier, I knew you, and then I got to know Anuja. We were working, for people who are on this, her wife, Anuja. And, when we were all working together, and when I saw both of you bringing your whole self to work and that transition, it was this like, sort of this blossoming, and it
Yeah.
was awesome to see. And so I do think it's such an important thing to, just to be able to celebrate and to be able to do that. And I think some people who don't go through that type of an experience just take it for
Yeah.
granted. So I just want to honor that. And I think it's awesome.
Well, thank you. And I'm grateful for you and for other folks who um, are this safe space and just
Yeah.
like a welcoming sounding board for all types of stories of the people that they work for, not just that unique example of me kind of coming out. But I think having folks around me that immediately like celebrated that and welcomed that made such a difference to kind of continue to have the confidence to do that, and to see how that is such a necessary part now of
Yeah.
how I have to show up every day to
Yeah.
work. And I think as I've gotten that comfort level, I've kind of gone deeper into what aspects of my journey into
Mhm.
coming out and being who I am actually are such a place of, I think, power in terms of the resilience that I developed in going through the sort of the rejection and things that I had faced, or the struggles that I had faced, and how I sometimes have a very people like tease me about this, but I'm a painfully even keel sometimes. They're like, "Are you hearing the problem I'm explaining?" And I'm just like, "Yes, but we
Yes.
can work through this." Like
Yeah.
it's kind of given me that resilience and that perspective and that calm in some situations that I think have really helped me a lot in my career, and hopefully helped others around me in that sense. And I think just it's the resilience, it's the calmness, and then it's the struggle, and just seeing the world through different eyes because of that, and being able to kind of empathize on a basic human level with a lot of people. And I know you very much operate like that, but I think for me, that part of my identity really shaped that aspect of how I operate. And I
Yeah.
think to work in any space, but to work in the social impact space, to me, that's so
Yeah.
critical. Um,
Absolutely. Absolutely. Again, I think some of the stuff you just mentioned, like your ability to listen, be present, be empathetic, and be so thoughtful and not rush and be the loudest and the one talking all the time. Those are all things that I loved working with you. And, you were really such an amazing thought partner for me. And you brought so much to everything. And that's anybody who's listening to this can really see why I said when we started this, that if I had a team, I'm like, you're my point guard, you're my floor general, and you're my captain, and I think like, it is so important, the people that you have around you, and those characteristics that you are talking about are actually part of another thing I want to talk to you about is your style of leadership. You is similar in ways to mine, in that like it's much more of an introverted leadership style. And you and I've talked over the years about how a lot of times that introverted, more quiet leader it's not exactly appreciated, or it's even overlooked, or sometimes looked down upon, and that we've experienced.
yeah.
And, I know we talked about it a lot. And I think, I'd love for you to be able to share with people like your perspective about the value of, an introverted leader, and someone who's more quiet about the way they go about things?
Yeah, no, that's I love that question, and I love that the point about too how it can often be perceived as lesser than in the
Yeah.
world of leadership, or non-existent, that you're not a
Right.
leader because you're not voicing something, or you're not the loudest person in that room or on that call. So, where is your leadership?
Yeah.
And for me, a lot of that, again, not to tie everything back to sports, but like we said, ball is life. So, for one of my favorite things that compliments that anyone's ever given me was one of my teammates, actually not for basketball, for tennis in high school, said one time to me that, because that wasn't her favorite sport or her thing or whatever, and she said, you just want it so badly and you play with such passion and you work so hard that it makes me want it more, and I don't want to let you down. Like, I want to do it because you want it so badly. And not that I know that's the best example or not, but like that really like stuck with me, that like what I took away from that was the leadership by example piece is incredibly powerful. Like, I could have said to my friend, like, get your butt here early, we're hitting around before practice, or you have to do this, or I could have been in her face style, like that type of captain in sports, like leadership. But just by watching the passion and just by doing, that had such more of an impact on her, and she willingly came to it and wanted to do that. So that has always stuck with me, and I think as I've gone on in my career, I've seen how applicable that can be
Yeah,
with
absolutely.
business. And lots of times, I think one of the things that is I didn't like in things I observed was when leaders ask folks that work for them to do stuff that they themselves aren't doing or that they wouldn't do. So I constantly call myself out of
Yeah.
like, am I showing up in that way? Am I adhering to this standard that I'm asking
Yeah.
someone else to keep up
Oh,
with?
that's
Because
amazing. Yeah.
there goes my credibility if I'm not
Yeah.
doing that. So the kind of lead by example thing is something that allows me to lead as a quiet leader, because I'm
Yeah.
doing, and I'm hoping that I'm doing it in a way that people want to join me, and not even follow. I say
No,
join me,
totally. Yeah,
because
yeah, yeah.
I want them to find their own footing and operate and lead in their own way.
Yeah.
I think another part of this, like, quieter leader, whatever we're labeling it as too, is I'm also not an incredibly definitive person. I'm very strongly opinionated about certain things that I'm very passionate about. But if someone says to me, what's the right way to do this task, this document, this approach, this problem? I'm never going to come with the like, you have to do it this way. And I think sometimes people expect that from leaders. And if
Oh,
someone
yeah, yeah, true.
wants that, I can try to meet them there. But oftentimes I'm like, well, I want to have a conversation and hear what you think,
Your
or
perspective.
I'm open to the fact that there's probably 10 ways to approach this challenge.
Yeah.
And so mine might be option A, but if your option, C, I'm not going to put that down. Or
Yeah.
I'm going to meet you and like listen and try to learn. And I think sometimes that can be perceived as a weakness in a leader,
Oh,
of like, you're
interesting.
not taking charge, you're not saying like,
Yeah,
this is the
yeah.
decision, this is what we need to do. But
Right. But it's funny though, as like the whole floor general point guard type thing, I've been with you in the trenches before. So I know when like it's on the line, you can make a decision right away. I think that
yeah,
I would challenge people if they're thinking of that situation, that's not leadership to them, that it actually is, I think, a really evolved sense of leadership, because you're continuing to grow as you're learning from others, their perspective they bring to the table. And that
right,
doesn't have to be your way or the highway. So
yeah,
yeah, I think you and I could go on about leadership conversation forever, but I love
yeah,
the perspective, and thank you so much for sharing that. But before I let you go here, I'd love to get some of your thoughts about the two spaces that you work on. And while your title again is Vice President of Social Impact, I know that you do so much of that, melding it with brand partnerships. So
yeah.
I'd love to hear anything you can share with us about like either how you've evolved your work in that space over time, or what are some of the trends that you're seeing in the spaces as they come together,
Yeah.
and really help us to think about how to think about the disciplines.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think some of the trends have actually led to more of the melding and
Yeah.
that intersection that I work at, because obviously with everything happening in the last 2 years with the
Mm.
Black Lives Matter movement, with everything around the pandemic, like there was already a movement towards brands being very vocal about their social impact efforts through their marketing channels, through their partnerships channels. But given the state of the world, it almost became the dominant tone. It really took
Yeah.
over. It wasn't appropriate to be pushing product driven messaging and
Oh,
other types of messaging. Like that purpose driven messaging really dominated the sphere. And there was such an uptick on an already upward
yeah.
trend. And I think the other trend that kind of culminated too was the kind of consumer consciousness and
Oh,
awareness that
yeah.
was growing um, around bad social impact from
Oh,
brands,
yeah.
and good, like true authentic intention, really integrated efforts to move the needle, and stuff that's sort of just a PR push for that brand to kind of get your attention by lightly doing good, that surface level, that shallow
Yeah.
impact. Consumers were already getting smarter and smarter, but because of the uptick in the amount of campaigns you're seeing, that intelligence, like, accelerated.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we got that. So I think, part of what we're seeing in the work that I'm really excited about is how brands are kind of more intentionally going about social impact through their partnerships
Yeah.
discipline. So whether that's obviously deep partnerships with change makers who are on the ground, whether they're individuals, nonprofit organizations, community orgs, those partnerships have always been a part of it, but theirs are becoming even more critical. But when we look at brand partnerships and sponsorship as a marketing channel for that brand, those efforts that they're doing, I think brands are increasingly pulling that through to that
Mm.
platform.
Yeah.
If you're a brand with a sports partnership, an entertainment partnership, that's going to be one of your loudest microphones, your furthest reaching channels to get that story out to consumers. And I think we're seeing more and more brands that are saying, instead of putting this maybe more traditional marketing message at the center of that partnership and how I utilize it, I want to tell the story of my more purpose driven efforts. And I think it's not just amplifying the story, it's actually leveraging those assets to mobilize more
Yeah.
change. Like, how can I galvanize the fans of this league to participate in this campaign that I'm doing around sustainability? How am I actually growing the impact, not just making that impact over here and then maybe boasting about it over here through this loud, microphone.
Yeah.
And I think it's not that simple. So I think a lot of the nuance of how to do that and how to do that well and how to make your purpose driven campaigns more participatory for people, that is hard work.
Yeah. It's
Exciting work,
hard.
like work I geek out on. But I think there's going to be a lot of efforts that brands are going to need to put towards that in the coming years to kind of yet leverage this opportunity they have to really more go about their social impact efforts in a more integrated way and really leverage all of the assets that they have at their disposal. It's no longer, okay, CSR sits over here, we
Yeah.
distribute monies through these organizations, and we kind of tell that story on that page on our website, and then everything else for the brand and marketing lives over here. It's much, much, much more integrated. And
Much
that's not
more.
something that happened yesterday. That's been happening in a big way. Like, I always love the example of like Spotify, like when they started their social impact team really bubbled up from within their marketing department. Like, it was integrated from the beginning. And I think we're starting to see more and more of that. And I think it's an exciting opportunity for folks that are working in sports and entertainment and in marketing to really have the work that they're doing have a deep impact in a really meaningful way to consumers.
Yeah. Well, I have to thank you for, no, honestly, like sincerely, I appreciate the work that you're doing in that space because it is so important. And, this company that I created, SLG Impact, it has that name for a reason. It's like I've always had this desire to impact. And I think that's one of the things that I admire and appreciate so much about you. And, as marketers, I think we have this desire to do that. And I have
Yeah.
something somewhere on my desk that I thought of one day and I wrote it down and it says like, do something that means something. And I think that's so much the core of what drives you and what you're doing, what drives me.
Yeah.
So I sincerely thank you so much for the work that you're doing, the pioneering work that you're doing. And We need more of it. So keep it up. And then my last question, back to, I'm going to go full circle to, so you're such a hoop head like I am, and it is the 25th anniversary of the WNBA, which we both got our starts in, separately, but both there. I have to know, who do you have taking the WNBA title this year?
Tough position to put me in, because I can practically see the home court of the New York Liberty right now. I'm really close. I've been going to all the games. So in my heart, I'm pulling for them.
Okay.
I'm also a big Sue Bird fan. I know that, there's a chance that coming off of gold in the Olympics, she could get another championship. So I'm going to put it out there that who I'm pulling for on the East is the Liberty.
Okay.
Who I would be pulling for from the West would be the Seattle Storm. But there's so many other teams that are really impressive right now. The Chicago Sky, the Aces. So that was a non-answer. That was a BS non-answer. I'm not going to stick with one prediction, but I'm just going to say WNBA is incredible. Tune in. It's been a great season so far. When they come back from the Olympics, it's going to be an exciting playoffs. So I'm just going to be excited to watch as a fan.
Absolutely. Well, I'll let you get back to your busy day. Adrienne, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.